It's a statement I've heard so many times after transplant, and that is someone suggests there are no true standards when it comes to living post-transplant life. What they mean by that is from center to center, there are so many variations between what we're being told, what we're being instructed to do post-transplant, that there's really no way of knowing. Is that actually the case, or could it be the case that people like me and you sometimes just don't want to hear the truth? I don't know which one's going to be the case, but I did want to discuss that with you today. So if you want to see me open this huge can of worms, go ahead and stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to Transplant Helper today. My name is Jim Merle. As I said just a moment ago in the teaser, today we're going to be talking about the variations from one transplant center to another when it comes to what we're being told as far as post-transplant care. Now, I know it's the case with me, perhaps it is with you if we're honest, that there are times when it comes to post-transplant life that we know there's certain things that we ought to do, or maybe on the other hand ought not to do, that we don't want to hear about. Why? Because it's not what we choose. And I don't ever want that to be the case for anyone. I know it needs to be the case that all of us as transplant patients are doing our very best to take care of our wonderful gifts and our entire bodies so that we can live the best life possible. However, someone would argue in that because there are so many prohibitions or do nots to the transplant life that you can't really live a good life doing that. And I realize we need to be living life to its fullest, enjoying ourselves, taking advantage of every breath and every day. And I certainly push for that and motivate you to do the same. However, there are certain times when you and I have to stop and make choices about the way we're going to live our lives in order to extend those lives as long as we can. And in this case, we're talking about, again, the variations from one center to another as far as those recommendations. Is it really the case that every transplant center is different? Let me address that question to begin with and tell you that there will be variations from one transplant center to the next. And generally speaking, the reason those variations actually occur is because there are going to be different teachers in each of those places. Let's take an example like mine. I had my transplant at UAB Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. Therefore, I was taught pre- and post-transplant classes by a certain group of nurses and coordinators and doctors and other personnel in the hospital that were teaching me what they believed to be the best recommendations and standards for me. However, if you had your transplant, say at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, or say at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, or in Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Clinic or anywhere else in the country, you may have heard something in your mind altogether different from what I heard as far as the do's and don'ts of transplant. But again, why does that occur? It occurs because I had different teachers, different educators, different instructors than you did. It's not the case that Vanderbilt University treats their patients by a whole different set of standards than, say, UAB Hospital does, or for that matter, any transplant center around the country. What we really need to be realizing is that those variations oftentimes come up, for lack of better terms, because of human shortfalls or because of human errors. Let me give you a personal example of that. I'm a transplant educator. That is, from time to time, I sit down with patients like I'm doing on this series of videos, and I try to teach them about transplant. However, I'll admit there are times when I'm teaching someone about transplant and I give them a certain list of information. I give them a certain list of standards that I think they need to follow by some national recommendations, which we'll mention in a moment, and that will be best for them. I may sit down with another patient tomorrow and teach them very similar information, but not always reveal exactly the same information to them, or maybe convey it in a different way, or maybe just altogether blow some questions, not answer them right. Why is that? It's because of human error. Basically speaking, every transplant center around the country, whether it's UAB or Vanderbilt or Emory or Cleveland Clinic or Mayo or anybody else, their sets of standards are not put forth by the individual doctors or by the individual coordinators. They did not decide what was going to be taught to you in these transplant classes. You say, now wait a minute, Jim. That's altogether wrong. I've still got the packet that I brought home from the hospital, and it's got their logos on it. It's got their information in it. It's got their contact numbers in it. Absolutely true. That's absolutely true. But again, actually, backed up behind all of those packets, no matter what the transplant center, there's a certain set of national data for your organ, whether it's heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, or whatever. There's a certain set standard of national data that's actually been researched and studied and turned over into their hands to take and to make their recommendations from, or even better yet, and really the standard is that they should just teach it. And that is, they may make slight variations from one thing to another, but at the end of the day, for the most part, they're all teaching the same information. Now, again, there's some who argue that. There's some who say, well, I never heard that I had to fully cook my meats. I like my steaks rare. Or someone over here says, well, I never heard that we can't go swimming in the creek across from my house. Or someone else says, well, I never heard that we can't be, in large crowds for the first 6 weeks post-transplant. Well, you may have never heard that, but it doesn't mean that that information was not supposed to be taught. You see, oftentimes, not every time, so I know I'm going to have some people arguing with this, but oftentimes, but not every time, much of the information we did not hear, or that we think we didn't hear, or that maybe that we missed altogether, it's not that it would not have been taught if that person had remembered to cover all the bases. And matter of fact, more times than not, if you'll reach and pick up that packet of paperwork that you received at the hospital, much of which you felt too tired or too bad or too sick or whatever to even read, if you'll pick that packet up, now that you're feeling a little bit better, and read it cover to cover and in detail, you'll find out there are many standards. There are many things that maybe you didn't hear, or maybe you didn't, or that you overlooked, or maybe in my case, I'll admit, I'm just hard-headed and I want to ignore. But it doesn't change the fact that there are standards. Is every single transplant center totally the same, totally alike in every aspect? No. But there are standards that are set, things that they're supposed to be teaching, things that you're supposed to be learning, both pre and post-transplant. So when we do like we do so many times, and I'll admit I've been a part of this, and I apologize for it, and we get on these Facebook groups and someone asks a simple question, and before you know it, you've got 97 different opinions, and you got people firing back and forth. And to be honest with you, people getting at one another and being just downright mean. There's no sense in that. If you'll stop, pull out your transplant packet, give your team a call, you'll find out what they want to teach you. And again, there may be some individual error in that, because one doctor, one coordinator, one nurse may have never heard of such, but it doesn't change the fact that there are certain recommendations that are out there for all of us that we're better off following if we can. Now, I'm not trying to offend anyone with this. I'm just trying to be honest, because I'm an educator too. I have shortcomings and shortfalls. I make mistakes. I make bad calls. But at the same time, when I answer questions, I try really, really hard not to answer based on opinion, not to answer based on personal experience, not to answer based on, well, I've been doing it for 4.5 years and it hadn't hurt me yet. That's the wrong attitude. The right attitude is, what is best for my body in the long run, given the fact that I'm trying to live life and enjoy it. I hope that you've understood what I'm trying to get across here. I'm sure I've pretty much been as clear as a muddy creek, but nonetheless, I think we need to understand there are set standards, even though there seem to be many more variations than there probably really are. There are certain things we need to do in order to best live this life. And I want to encourage you to always do what you can to live this life, to take care of your organ, take care of your entire body, and try to live in honor of your donor and your donor's family. That's the best way to live, and to do the best you can. And don't try to do things that just downright, if you admit it, or if I admit to myself, they're just not the best. So make good choices, live your life, be happy, be strong. And as always, I say to everyone, until next time, stay stronger, friends.